Today on Locked On Canadiens, Montreal stages an improbable comeback against the Colorado Avalanche, and the Nick Suzuki disrespect ends now.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into episode 1272 of Locked On Canadiens. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day and for subscribing wherever you get your podcast. Doing that supports the show and ensures you don't miss an episode right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. My name is Ian Boisvert, also known as that Maybe It's Ian, and I am joined by Laura Saba, also known as the Active Stick. Laura, it's a shame the shootout had to come in and just be what the shootout is, which is a mechanism to determine who gets the extra point, because that was an incredible comeback by the Montreal Canadiens on Saturday night.
Against a team that's really terrifying. We
Yeah.
need to point that out. We need to point out how good Colorado is. And the Canadiens come back against them. So in their two games this season, there was an overtime win and a shootout loss, right?
Both shootouts. They
were both shootouts.
Yeah, Kirby Doc had the shootout win in the first one, funny enough. But that was a much more lower scoring affair. It was 1-1 going into overtime. So much different vibe to the one on Saturday night. We will break down all of our thoughts as fast as we can in this first segment, because there's a lot of them, but we're going to try to squeeze them in there. We have to give Nick Suzuki his flowers. He continues to be one of the better centers in the National Hockey League, and nobody seems to really notice or care, or just like slandering the guy for no reason. And then we'll talk about the week as it was. I think it was a good, not great week for the Montreal Canadiens. They picked up points in every game. We'll figure out what the difference was between having the good week that they had and making it a great week. Looking into the weeks to come. So we'll start on Saturday, 3-0 in the second period for the Colorado Avalanche. Montreal gets one back. Slavkovsky on a deflection. They had a minute 6 of 5-on-3 before that period ended. They weren't able to score. More on the power play, I think, in the third segment. Period 3, they give up another one. They go down 4-1, and the Bell Center was just deflated. There was nothing left. I think folks had just kind of recognized that, Colorado they are this guy. They are this team. They're incredible. I saw a lot of fans posting this, and I wholeheartedly agree that when the Canadiens are in their final form, we want them to be the Colorado Avalanche. Like, that's to
Absolutely.
me that's the greatest team in the league. Personally, like, I know there's a lot of great ones. Colorado's that. Like, they're just built different.
And I think we have to remember it's not just about standings, right? Like, it's very easy to say Florida or Washington or whatever. It's about the way they play and how hard it is to beat them. Like, to me, like a team like Colorado is not just incredible. It's not just fast, skilled, blah, blah, blah. It's also just really hard to beat them.
Yeah, and they did nothing but make themselves even better at the trade deadline and throughout the season. Like, give Chris McFarland and Joe Sakic a lot of credit. They've essentially remade their roster around their core. I mean, now that their center lines read Nathan McKinnon, Brock Nelson, Charlie Coyle down the middle. Are you kidding? Like, that's not fair. It's not fair. They're an incredible team. Montreal goes down 4-1. I almost said Patrick Waugh. Different Colorado Avalanche, and we just saw him this week. That's why the name is off the top of my head. Joshua Waugh gets his second goal in as many games. Slavkovsky gets his second on a play where he just went to the middle of the ice with the puck and ripped it by Mackenzie Blackwood. And then Dvorak ties it on one of the funniest goals I think we'll ever see. Christian Dvorak, every once in a while, just decides he is him. And that's what happened on that play.
That was so good.
I think the only reason why this game, the only reason the Colorado Avalanche ended up leaving with 2 points is because the clock saved them.
Yes.
They were toast in this game, late in the game. They've been traveling. They've been playing a lot on the East Coast. They were out of gas. Hudson hit a crossbar after the Slavkovsky goal to bring them within one. Caulfield hit another crossbar. Dvorak scored, and then they just kind of the Avs just kind of waited the clock out. They tried to get to overtime. I pointed this out earlier. It's a shame the shootout had to ruin this, because it gives the Avs a point in a skills competition. But I think the Canadiens feel better about that loss than the Avalanche do about that win. No?
I agree. And you could just even look at like what the fans were saying too. that was kind of the sentiment all around. If you looked at Colorado fans, they said it was a dissatisfying win, or like did we really deserve that, or questions like that. Whereas like in Montreal, we were happy with the loss, which is so weird. And I think it does kind of help too that. Quick reminder, by the way, the Colorado Avalanche, one of the reasons they were tired is because this week they beat up a hell of a lot on the Ottawa Senators. I just wanted to remind everyone of that. But at the same time that was happening, I was watching Leafs fans as well. The other Hockey Night in Canada game was the Toronto Maple Leafs against the Nashville Predators, and that was really hilarious. And just
5-2 Nashville, one of the worst teams in the league, just bouncing off of the Leafs. Like, that's incredible.
Just and just watching the like contrasting like the media and the fans and the quotes, and it was just a really good night for the Montreal Canadiens, because even though they lost, and if they're out of the playoffs by 1 point, I don't want to point to this game as the point that they gave up. Like, that is not it, right? Like, if they came even close to making the playoffs, I want to point to this game as one of the reasons why, because playing like this, they showed us that it doesn't matter how much better than you a team is. If you can find a way to win any night, the outcome could be yours, right? And any night it could be a toss-up. And it's really funny because one time after we finished recording, I don't know if it was at the end of the game or if we finished recording already, Ian asked, like, if the Canadiens do make the playoffs in that wild card spot, which team would you rather they play? And I said, I don't care, because this is the Montreal Canadiens that's going to show up to the playoffs, right? The Montreal Canadiens that I think we can say, yes, there was a slump in there somewhere. I think we can say that more than the second half of the season, right? I would say, a little over that, the Canadiens have been playing like this. And so this to me is the Montreal Canadiens. The October and November Montreal Canadiens and parts of December, that's not the Montreal Canadiens. It's not a flash in the pan. This is real. It's here to stay.
Yeah, I think they've been this team more often than they were the bad team.
Yes.
Through like the first couple months of the season, they were just bad. It was just they were bad. They weren't the roster they expected to hit the ice with. Remember, they didn't have Patrick Laine. That was a big that was a big part of their summer, and it was a big part of the team they wanted to be. Now they have them. By the way, Patrick Laine is playing some very inspired hockey as of late. He's making he has a he turns the puck over from time to time. Who doesn't on this team, to be honest? But more often than not now, he's becoming the first guy to get back and cover for his mistake, which is not something we would have seen from Patrick Laine earlier this season. He's throwing the body around.
Yeah, it also makes me feel like he's healing, right? Being the first to skate back and being a little bit more aggressive physically. I feel like he's healing, like his injury's getting better.
Yeah, the shootout goal was also really fun to watch, just especially because everything he does now is in slow motion. he came in slow motion, and it felt pretty obvious he was either going to take just a wild wrist shot off the bar, or he was going to go to the backhand and go top shelf, and he did it. And I mean, that shootout move took 35 seconds in and of itself. Like, he was just, it's very funny to watch him fool guys at, like, I don't even know if we could say half speed at this point. That's like 30% speed, if that.
Poor guy. He and Brendan Gallagher, man.
Yeah. No, I think that, Laine picks up an assist in this one. A really great pass to Newhook as he then broke to the middle of the ice, and he, did a spinorama shot off the pads that went to Joshua Waugh for his second. But I thought that was a really strong game from him as well. There's one more player we have to touch on, Lauren. I believe it comes with our visual aid, if you would like to pull up our friend, the Mike Matheson meter.
Yes.
Throughout the game, I thought Mike Matheson was pretty good. And then he played some legitimate hero ball in overtime. He was incredible in that overtime. Slavkovsky gets called on a very chintzy holding penalty that the Canadiens kill off, in large part due to Mike Matheson just being an incredible penalty killer in that moment. I know he didn't score, and we usually save this for scoring, but that's a 5. That was a 5 moment for Mike Matheson. He was awesome in this game.
I was gonna say, throughout the game, it was like between a 3 and a 4, and then in that overtime, it's off the chart now. It's on my side of the screen.
He nearly scored. He nearly scored after being on the ice for 2 full minutes of that penalty kill. He took off like he was fired out of a cannon, and if it was earlier in the shift, he probably beats that Colorado Avalanche player to the net. But at the end of that 2-minute shift, he was still able to just barely get there. And just watching that puck squeak wide of the net was like heartbreaking, because that would have been the best way for that game to end, is Mike Matheson just calling game. That would have been incredible.
If he had scored, it would be like Magic Mike XXL. Like, that's what it would have been.
Yeah. No, it was incredible. Look, the Canadiens, they probably shouldn't make a habit of going down 3-0 and 4-1 in hockey games, but they have proven that those games are not over when they get down in those situations. Yeah. It would be nice to see them start to play with the lead for a little while and see how they can handle that, because that's another part of their game they still have to learn, is how to hold a lead and play with the lead late in the game. But for now, they're stealing points. They're keeping pace with everybody else that's chasing them in the Eastern Conference. And for that, we have to be thankful for the effort on Saturday night in Montreal. Another just excellent Bell Center game. They were down by a goal and they were olaying. Like, they just kind of knew what was happening in that building. All right, we're going to step aside for a minute. We'll come back and we'll talk about Nick Suzuki and how criminally underrated he seems to be this season. And we'll get into that in just a minute. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1-ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days, whether I'm at my desk or on a road trip and I just need a quick protein boost. They're always my go-to. I love the different variety flavors of the no-shell variety, like sea salt and vinegar or the chili roasted. They're both very, very good. But if you like cracking into every shell for that satisfying crunch, don't worry. They haven't forgotten about you. The in-shell options are always a classic favorite. Get snacking and cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, Laura, it is time to opine about the greatness that is Nick Suzuki. Mm-hmm. And to start, we actually have to talk about Nathan MacKinnon, who got the Nick Suzuki matchup on Saturday night and really popped off on the score sheet. 0 points, 6 shots, -2, 38% at the faceoff dot. That, to me, I'm so baffled by that, because, like, I know Nick Suzuki's great, right? Nathan MacKinnon is a different level. Like, he's a different
level, and on a great year too.
Yeah, he could win the Hart Trophy again for the second straight year. I think there's only 2 players who have done that in the last 30 years, and one of them could be Nathan MacKinnon now. And Suzuki just, I don't know, like, made very, very easy work of him, and his line scored 2 goals. It's not like they were just playing shutdown against that line. Suzuki's line was driving the comeback.
Yes, absolutely.
There's been a lot of Nick Suzuki disrespect as of late. I find it funny that the loudest disrespect is coming in his best season. I think it's a lot of people kicking and screaming and trying to hold on to the truth they believe to be real, which is that he's not a real number 1 center. I think a lot of this started with Nick Kypreos within the last week or so, going on the radio and basically saying that when Montreal is good, Suzuki won't be the team's number 1 center, which is complete garbage. Like, that's just not true. And anybody who watches this team knows that that's not true. When do you think this disrespect is ever going to end? Is it going to have to end with him with a cup over his head? Like, is that the only way this ends?
He's going to win a cup, or if he wins a cup, obviously there's no guarantee. He will be holding the cup above his head, and somebody watching that on the play-by-play or whatever, the color commentary, is going to be like, imagine if they had a true number 1 center. Imagine how many cups they could have won. So there's something about that, because here's the thing, like, Montreal is now in a place where they are not going to be picking first overall in the next 10 to 15 years. That's just the way it is. It took long enough for them to pick first overall when they picked Slavkovsky, and it took like a confluence of insane like coincidences and injury luck and all of that kind of stuff for them to get to that point. Now, when I say that, I'm not like, we don't believe in jinxes, or at least my co-host doesn't believe in jinxes. I'm just saying, like, if the Canadiens are bad in the next 10 to 15 years, the best they can hope for is another top 5 pick. I don't think they're picking number 1 overall. How many of the centers that are like Nathan MacKinnon or, Connor McDavid or Sidney Crosby in his prime or Bedard or Celebrini, 2 years from now, how many of those guys are available not at number one? It does not exist. It simply does not exist. So the Montreal Canadiens do not have a chance at getting a player of that echelon unless it's somebody coming off their prime, wanting to come here for sentimental reasons, in which case they will be the second line center, or something happens again and they get that first overall pick, because nobody's trading them that. This is not the year where like Burke makes magic or whatever, and they do trades like that. There's no Eric Lindros in this. So they are never going to have a number one center, a center in that echelon. And that echelon includes 4 to 5 people max. Everyone else below them is Nick Suzuki caliber. And I'm sick of people counting Nick Suzuki below those guys. And I think that that's just, it's not fair. And I don't, there's something about Nick Suzuki that like the expectations on him are just insane, especially since he's still so young and he's so good. Like you are watching him with your eyes do these things, take the toughest matchups, often play the most minutes, and he's thriving there. Like he has absolutely no nerves. He's always just cool as a cucumber. He's always just leading by example, and people are like, that's not a number one center. Like who are they going to get? Who are the Canadians going to get that are better than Nick Suzuki? Nobody.
Well, at center, there's only 8 of them with more points than Nick Suzuki. He's 9th in league scoring by centers at 72 points. That not only is that a number one center, that's a top 10 number one center in this National Hockey League. Like that, I find it's just people who, like Nick Suzuki hasn't developed that sort of name brand quality to him that like a McKinnon or a McDavid or an Eichel, like those guys have gotten, and he'll never get that. Like that's just not something that he's going to be able to pick up. But this idea that is the driving force for a lot of the mainstream media to be like, well, he's not a number one center. Well, why? Because you've just decided that his name doesn't pop the same way as like any of those other guys. Not only is he 9th among centers this year, he's 20th in league scoring across the league. 20th in league scoring. There are 19 players with more points than Nick Suzuki in the entire National Hockey League. I find it really difficult to listen to people who talk about this. And I mean, I don't mean to, I'm gonna also put a little bit of this on our own fan base for a moment. Last year, or maybe it was the year before, when Kirby Dach had stepped in and made a bunch of strides in the right direction in a season that was still riddled with injuries, but he ended up playing most of the year. And everyone a lot of people in the fan base went, well, he's going to be the number one center ahead of Nick Suzuki. That's not going to happen now. And it's not because just Kirby Dach has fallen off. It's because Nick Suzuki's game has elevated to a point where there's not a center in the system right now who's going to be able to pass him. Maybe Michael Hage eventually, but we're talking 5-6 years down the line before we see that happen. Yeah. This is a guy who plays all situations. He penalty kills when they need him to. Right now, he's playing both power play waves because they don't have another center, because it would be Alex Newhook, but Newhook is already on the second unit. So it's either that or like Christian Dvorak or Jake Evans gets added to the power play. But those guys penalty kill, so you don't want to do that. Like I find that a lot of the criticism of Nick Suzuki as not being good enough to be a number one center comes from people who do not watch this team. And Correct. That should be a red flag to everybody who pays attention to this team. There's enough Habs media out there to be able to tell you whether or not a player is good. I don't think that Nick Kypreos has watched a ton of Montreal Canadiens hockey this year. That's not his job. I'm not criticizing him for that, but like you should be able to pick up when somebody is saying something that's just frankly untrue. He's top 10 in league scoring among centers. I don't know how else we have this conversation if we're not just looking at that one number. It took 10 seconds to find that, by the way. Like, it's not difficult. Natural stat trick is great. Learn how to use it. And also, I'll reiterate what I've said all season. Watch the games. Like, watch them. Nick Suzuki, since the Four Nations, has been the most locked-in player on the Montreal Canadiens. He is driving this return to playoff relevancy. It goes through him. I can't reiterate enough that the people who are criticizing Nick Suzuki and saying he's not a number one center aren't watching.
They don't know what they're talking about.
It's irrelevant to me. Their points are moot. I don't think that there's any value in it.
I was listening to there's a podcast called Never Offside with Kat Toffoli and Julie Petrie. And one of the first episodes that they had on was Caitlin Fitzgerald, Nick Suzuki's fiance. And they talked about, like, how did it feel when he was named captain, blah, blah, blah. And like throughout the whole episode, there were so many echoes of just how young these two are. And like, in particular, like I'm focusing on like Nick Suzuki's age. He is now 25 years old. This man is 25 years old, right? Imagine him at 28.
Yeah, he's not even
Imagine him at 28. Yeah, there you go. So, like, he's top 10 now. 2 years from now, 3 years from now, what's he going to be? Like, I don't know. It's going to be incredible. Like, I cannot wait for 2 to 3 years from now watching this entire team.
Yeah, and we talk about Suzuki hitting his prime within the next year, 2 years. One of his line mates is 20 years old. Slavkovsky is going to raise his game as he ages and matures in this league to the point where it's going to be even easier for Nick Suzuki to find more offense, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about a line that we joke about second half Slav. That's because first half Slav didn't score. There was no offense coming from him. So the fact that like he's eventually going to grow out of that sort of baby fat, so to speak, and like become a guy that can be depended on for primary scoring. I mean, we're talking about potentially Nick Suzuki pushing 100 points if Slavkovsky can pick that part of his game up, right?
Yeah. Or if Ivan Demidov ends up on that first line.
Yes, everyone is just so conveniently forgets that they have this kid over the KHL who's going to be incredible. Like everybody just seemingly is like, whatever, it doesn't matter. Nick Suzuki stinks. It's disappointing. We will not tolerate this slander on this show. It will not happen on our watch. Habs fans, stay vigilant. We will continue to back Nick Suzuki until the very end. All right, we're going to step aside from that conversation. When we come back, we have a week to break down that was good and not great for the Montreal Canadiens, and we'll talk about maybe some of the differences that they'll need to approach before they can have a truly great week next week. And we'll get into that in just a minute. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. I started using Monarch to get a better grasp of my spending. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending primarily on food delivery. Spoiler alert, it was a lot. Now I can budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, from credit card apps to banking apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without any of the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use Locked On NHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right. Laura, the Canadiens have lost one game in regulation since coming back from the Four Nations. It was a 1-0 shutout against the Calgary Flames in Calgary. The West Coast swing is always really difficult. And that was the only game they've lost in regulation, 13 games. And they've managed to pick up points in all but one of them. This week, it seems to sort of follow that trend. Montreal had 3 games, a win over Ottawa, an overtime loss to the Islanders, and a shootout loss to the Colorado Avalanche. They pick up points in all 3 of them. As of the time of this recording on Sunday, they remain in that playoff spot, and they will throughout Sunday because none of the teams that they're jockeying for position are also playing on Sunday. But they pick up a point. They remain 1 point ahead of the New York Rangers, who have played 2 more games. So the win percentage there is much higher for the Canadiens. Games remaining, games at hand, they only really matter if you win them. I think everyone's kind of just penciling it in like, well, we're 4 points up on the Rangers because we've got 2 extra games. No, you got to win those games. And like that
you can't just pencil the points in.
Yeah, exactly. And your schedule is probably a little bit more condensed, right? 2 points up on the Islanders with the same amount of games played. 4 points up on the Blue Jackets with the same amount of games played. 5 points up on the Red Wings with the same amount of games played. And then you get to Boston, who they're 6 points up on, but they have 2 more games at hand. So really, it looks like it's going to be Montreal and the New York teams, maybe Columbus, who they're fighting with for that last playoff spot. Your thoughts on the week as a whole? What will you remember this week by if someone were to ask you, hey, how did this week go for the Montreal Canadiens?
I think ultimately the third period against the Colorado Avalanche and the game against the Senators. I think we have to put both of them together. Now I know like the New York Islanders are also sort of in the playoff hunt behind the Montreal Canadiens, but I think winning against the Ottawa Senators was so important, and just keeping themselves in that conversation, but also just the comeback versus the Colorado Avalanche, because I hope it taught them something about not giving up, and I hope it taught them something about the fact that they're able to theoretically beat anybody in this league, including one of the best, if not the best team in the league.
I found that the players, the conversations they had with the media after the Colorado game, it seemed like they were all very excited about what they pulled off, but they kind of, because of the dumbness of the shootout, just kind of deciding the winner, they kind of had to tamp down their excitement because they lost. That's sort of what the vibe I got anyway, was like they're all very excited that they erased this against a perennial Stanley Cup contender. But like because of the Gary Bettman of it all, and like just the skills competition that decided the game, they all had to kind of take a beat and be like, well, we didn't get the both points, so like we can't be fully happy about it, which I think is garbage. Be happy about it. You mentioned Ottawa and that win over Ottawa. Montreal's they're only 4 points back of the Senators for that first wild card spot. So I said, I think last week at some point, I don't think that spot is out of play. I think Montreal can get there. Ottawa needs to have a rough couple games, and Montreal just needs to keep their foot on the gas, and that could be something that they pull off. I think too, this week is also the week that secondary scoring stepped up in a big way. Obviously in the Ottawa game, the third line, the Gallagher, Dvorak, Anderson line was incredible. Even though they haven't scored too much, the second line, I mean, Newhook for me, I think this is a weird call, but I think he's my player of the week. And I think that's just because, yes, he hasn't gotten the bounces. He's got terrible puck luck, but watch him play. Like, he's flying out there. He's making really great plays. I've loved the play of Alex Newhook this week. And I think it's just a matter of time before the puck bounces his way and we're talking about Alex Newhook having like a 3 or 4 point game. Like, that's just sort of what I'm watching with Alex Newhook. What other players stood out to you?
Well, obviously we got a lot of flack for making fun of Ottawa for giving up 4 points to Christian Dvorak, but he's played so well recently, right? He's been really good since even before the Four Nations, maybe a little bit around the time. Let's just use that as a time marker. So I think he's been really good. Overall in the week, Brendan Gallagher was fantastic. And tough time for him, and he played through it. Definitely. I didn't notice, and here's the thing that's interesting is I didn't notice Jake Evans and Armia and that line as much. But when I thought about it, like, they're probably still doing the same things they're always doing. It's just that everyone else has stepped up. And that's how it's supposed to be. We're not supposed to notice them. They're supposed to be quietly just, being like one of the better fourth lines of the league. That's what you want.
Yeah. I thought they were great against Colorado. They got a lot of great time forechecking. They kept giving the puck over to Colorado and then immediately working hard and getting it back. Like, I love that about that line. They just don't give up. Yes. And that sort of attitude is permeated through the team. The one spot I think the Canadiens can afford to improve on going into next week, and hopefully it's the difference maker in a lot of their games, is the power play. Yes. They had 13 power play opportunities this week, which is a lot in 3 games. They had 4 against Ottawa, 5 against the Islanders, 4 against Colorado. They went 2 for 13. They had 2 power play goals in 13 attempts this week. The first unit, a lot of time, was just struggling. They haven't been able to find it. Good teams are just gluing themselves to Patrick Laine on the other side. There were times where I was watching him against Colorado, and he's standing there just like not even really looking like he's trying to play, because what's the point? Like, he's just they're not gonna get off of him. Good teams are gonna do that to Laine. It's up to the other 4 to figure out how to score. So power play needs to figure it out, and I think they'll have a better week in the week ahead. Tomorrow we'll cover the weekly forecast, so we'll give you a better look at what's to come.
I think it'd be really funny if Patrick Laine, like in the power play, was just like standing on the ice, just dancing or whatever.
Yeah.
Just like, there's no point. Just dancing.
Yeah. Just Sean Avery a guy. Just start waving your stick in front of his face. Do something.
Or like invent a new dance move or something. Like he's on TikTok. Like they're doing the power play. He's like on TikTok.
Just get in front of him, do the John Cena, like you can't see me.
But one thing I did want to say is that, like, I feel like, as much as they talked about this, from December onwards, they talked about like they feel that they can beat anybody. Like there's so much belief in this room. I really feel like the Colorado game was when they actually started believing what they were saying themselves. Like that's the sense that I got, because they were always saying it. They were always talking about it. But I think they finally, like, they saw it in action, right? Like, and that to me is huge. I think that this game is huge. And I really hope that the lesson that they take away from this is that they could beat anybody. And hopefully they'll get an opportunity to do that in the first round.
Yeah. I mean, look, we're looking down a potential matchup with potential President's Trophy winner Washington Capitals in the first round. We've seen that movie before. That's worked out in our favor in the past. So I mean, that would be something that I would welcome that opportunity to just go match yourself up against the best team in the league for 2 weeks and try your best. Like that's all. It's house money. Who cares if you win or lose? Like go out there and do it. I think that game against Colorado, I think you're totally right. I think it's they could talk the talk and now they can walk the walk. Like they actually know that they can stick in there against any team in the league now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man, always fun stuff with this team. One of my favorite Habs teams, maybe ever. I've really just loved watching this team every single time.
So good.
The vibes are incredible. Like I said, they were doing the wave and olaying when they were down a goal against Colorado. It's unbelievable, the environment at the Bell Center. All right, let's hit our trivia and then head out of here. Last week's question was a player path. Follow the player path. Colorado, Montreal, LA, Tampa, LA. Do you have the answer, Laura?
I don't remember. You gave it to me and then I forgot.
It's Peter Budaj, goaltender Peter Budaj, who played a lot in Montreal. He came in, and I remember there were games where like they were playing the Boston Bruins, and that was like when both teams were at the peak of their powers as of late. And they'd be like, "Yeah, Peter Budaj is going to get this game, not Carey Price." And Michel Therrien was nuts for that, but it worked out a lot of the time.
It did. They were besties, he and Price.
Yeah. Correct answers on that one. Joe Segreto was first. Jacques Face Punch, Good Sport, and Francis followed. All right. This question actually comes from Laura, but I'll read it because I wrote it down. In the Habs 5-0 comeback against the Rangers on February 19th, 2008, Michael Ryder had 2 goals. Kovalev had 2 goals, but who had the 5th goal that forced overtime for the Montreal Canadiens in that game? If you have the answer, put it in the comments down below. Let us know. You guys know how to reach out to us. We will tell the world how smart you are. That's going to do it for us today on this episode of Locked On Canadiens. Thanks so much for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NHL podcast, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter, local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Same place goes for us. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts and here on YouTube. Please subscribe. We just passed 4,000 subscribers, so thanks so much for everybody who decides to make us part of your daily routine. You can find us just about everywhere we post things at Locked On Canadiens on Instagram, Bluesky, TikTok, posting clips of the show. You can find me at Maybe It's Ian. You can find Laura at The Active Stick. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we will see you guys tomorrow.